There is a moment before a disappearance, before someone crosses the invisible line between existence and oblivion. A moment where everything still seems normal. Where they are still here, still breathing, still real. And then, nothing. No footprints leading away. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Just an empty space where a person should be. A man walks into an airport, his movements uneasy. He looks over his shoulder, scanning the crowd as if something, or someone, is after him. Minutes later, he runs. Past security. Through the doors. Into the wilderness. And then, he is gone. A lighthouse stands against the crashing waves, its keepers tending to the light as they always have. But when the next ship arrives, there is no one to greet them. The tower is empty. The lamps are still burning. The clocks have stopped. 3 men are missing, and the only clue, a cryptic journal entry about an approaching storm. But there was no storm. Only silence. A child sleeps in a warm bed, her parents just step away. They check on her once, twice. But the third time, the bed is empty. No broken locks. No cries for help. Just a window left slightly open, and a story the world still can't explain. And then there's the woman who was seen walking along the highway, her dress torn, her eyes vacant, her hands empty. A house left behind, blood smeared on the walls. A meal left uneaten. A phone ripped from the cord. She was never seen again. They stepped into the unknown. And they never returned. People don't just vanish. And yet, these 4 did. Their stories remain, trapped in faded photographs, in police reports, in whispered theories. But the truth? That disappeared with them. Turn down the lights. Let the rain fall. And prepare for a journey into the world of the unexplained. Story 1. The Flannan Isles. A cluster of rocky landforms battered by waves, standing defiantly against an unforgiving ocean. For centuries, they have been uninhabited, save for the seabirds that will through the gray sky and the occasional traveler who dares to step foot on their craggy shores. They are small, desolate, and known mostly for one thing, a lighthouse. A beacon built to guide sailors away from the very rocks that make these isles so treacherous. At the turn of the 20th century, the Flannan Isles lighthouse was manned by 3 men, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur. They were seasoned keepers, men who had dedicated their lives to solitude and routine, tending to the great light that cut through the darkness. They were used to isolation, to the endless expanse of water stretching in every direction, to the relentless storms that rolled in without warning. For weeks at a time, they lived on this remote outpost, their world shrinking to the walls of the lighthouse, to the narrow, winding stairs leading up to the lantern room, to the roaring sea just beyond their doorstep. Supplies were delivered by boat at scheduled intervals, and communication with the outside world was sparse. It was a life of discipline. A life of quiet repetition. Until one day, they were gone. No bodies. No explanations. No sign of a struggle. Just an empty lighthouse, standing alone against the waves. A relief crew was sent to check on them after days of unanswered messages. They expected a routine visit, to find the keepers waiting, perhaps weary but otherwise well. Instead, they found something else. Something they couldn't explain. The lighthouse was locked from the inside. The clocks had stopped. The fire had burned out. A meal sat on the table, uneaten, as if abandoned in haste. And in the logbook, the last entry was unsettling. The storms are bad. The sea is raging. All 3 of us are praying. But the records show there were no storms in the area at that time. The island was searched. Every inch combed over. The cliffs examined, the shoreline checked. But there was nothing. Nowhere for them to have gone. It was as if they had vanished into the wind. December 26, 1900. The relief ship Hesperus approaches the Flannan Isles, carrying fresh supplies and a replacement keeper. The journey has taken longer than expected, rough seas had delayed their arrival. But now, as the boat draws closer, something feels wrong. Normally, there would be movement along the shore. A figure waiting by the landing dock, a wave from the rocks above. A sign of life. But the island is still. No one is there to greet them. Captain James Harvey watches the lighthouse tower loom in the distance, its structure unwavering against the wind. He signals their arrival. A whistle cuts through the air, echoing across the cliffs. Once. Twice. But no answer comes. The only response is the crashing of waves against the jagged shore. A crewman is sent ashore. He steps out onto the slippery stone, the spray of seawater cold against his face. Climbing the worn path toward the lighthouse, he glances at the windows, expecting to see movement inside, a shadow passing by, a sign that the keepers are inside, waiting. But the windows remain empty. Dark. Lifeless. He reaches the door and knocks. The sound is swallowed by the wind. He knocks again, harder this time. Still nothing. He tries the handle. Locked. From the inside. His pulse quickens. He steps back, scanning the cliffs, the surrounding land, calling their names. Thomas. James. Donald. His voice is carried away by the wind. Something is wrong. With force, he shoves against the heavy wooden door. It resists for a moment, then gives way, creaking open into darkness. Inside, the air is cold. Stale. The fireplace has gone out. The warmth of the last fire long since faded, leaving only dead embers in its place. He steps into the kitchen. And stops. The table is set. Plates, cutlery. A meal half-eaten, abandoned mid-bite. A chair lies on its side, as if someone had stood up too quickly. Something about the scene feels unnatural. As if time has been interrupted. The clocks on the walls have all stopped. There is no movement in the narrow hallway. No voices calling out. Only silence. The beds in the quarters remain untouched, neatly made, waiting for men who should have returned to them long ago. The lighthouse is perfectly in order. Except for one thing. The keepers are gone. And then, the logbook. The last remaining words of the men who once lived here. The crewman scans the recent entries, his breath slow, measured, as he reads the final lines. The storms are bad. The sea is raging. All three of us are praying. He frowns. The words are frantic, desperate. He turns the pages, searching for more, but the entries stop there. The next date remains blank, untouched. The pen never met the page again. But there is something wrong with this account. Something that makes the hairs on the back of his neck rise. There had been no storms. No reports of raging seas. No warnings of violent winds. The skies had been clear. The waters, calm. The weather, ordinary. And yet, the final words written by the keepers spoke of fear. Of something approaching. Of something they could not control. But whatever it was, it left no trace. And neither did they. In the days that followed the discovery, searches were launched. Crews scoured every inch of the small island. They checked the cliffs, the jagged rocks below, the surrounding waters. But there was nothing. No bodies. No torn clothing caught on the sharp edges of stone. No evidence that anyone had ever left the lighthouse at all. Just the empty rooms. The stopped clocks. The unfinished meal. And so, the questions began. One theory suggests a rogue wave, a powerful, towering wall of water, capable of swallowing anything in its path. Some believe the men, perhaps tending to their duties outside, were caught off guard, swept away in an instant, leaving no time for cries of alarm. The sea, indifferent as ever, would have closed over them, leaving nothing behind. But that explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why would all three keepers be outside at the same time? Protocol dictated that one should always remain inside, monitoring the light. And if such a wave had struck with enough force to pull them into the ocean, wouldn't there have been signs? Disruption. Damage. Yet, inside the lighthouse, everything was in order. Others propose a more human explanation. A fight, perhaps, tensions boiling over in isolation, leading to violence. One man turning on the others, or an argument spiraling out of control. But there was no evidence of a struggle. No overturned furniture, no blood, no signs of panic. Then there are those who look beyond the rational. Some claim the island has always carried something unnatural. That the keepers were not alone that night. Legends of ghostly figures moving through the mist, whispers on the wind that do not belong to the living. Local fishermen, long before the disappearance, spoke of unease when passing the Flannan Isles. They avoided getting too close. Some said the land itself did not welcome visitors. A few have even reported sightings over the years. Strange lights flickering from the tower when no one was stationed there. Shadows shifting in the windows of an empty building. The faint sound of voices carried by the wind, voices calling for help, only for the island to be just as empty as it was in 1900. Officially, the case remains unresolved. No definitive answer has ever been found. Theories have risen and fallen, but the truth remains just out of reach, hidden in the relentless waves that continue to crash against the cliffs. To this day, no one lives on the Flannan Isles. The lighthouse, though automated, stands empty. The wind moves through the abandoned corridors, filling the silence left behind by the three men who should still be there. But they are not. And they never will be. Story 2. Lars Mittank was not supposed to vanish. He was just another traveler, another face in the crowd. A 28-year-old German tourist, enjoying a summer getaway with friends. They drank, they laughed, they watched soccer matches late into the night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until everything changed. One evening, a disagreement erupted, a simple argument over soccer teams, the kind that happens in bars all over the world. But this one turned physical. A brief scuffle, a punch thrown. And Lars, caught in the middle, suffered an injury to his ear. Not life-threatening, just an inconvenience. Something he expected to heal. But when the time came to leave, a doctor advised caution. The pressure of flying could worsen the damage. His friends, needing to return home, had no choice but to leave without him. Lars reassured them it was fine. He would catch a later flight, just a few days behind them. It was a small delay, nothing more. At least, that's what everyone believed. In the days that followed, something changed. Lars was alone in a foreign country, waiting for his flight. But instead of passing the time sightseeing, instead of resting and recovering, he became uneasy. His phone calls home took on a different tone. He spoke in hushed voices, his words careful, deliberate. He told his mother he didn't feel safe. That something was wrong. But what, exactly, was he afraid of? Who, if anyone, was watching him? His words grow more urgent. He whispers into the phone, tells his mother that he needs to leave, that he needs to find a way out. The fear in his voice is unmistakable. But there is no clear reason. No threats, no incidents reported. To the outside world, nothing is wrong. And yet, Lars is convinced otherwise. Something had changed. Something he couldn't explain. Hours earlier, he had been a man with a plan, a delayed flight, a few extra nights in Bulgaria, then home. But now, alone in a budget hotel near the airport, he was no longer sure if home was within reach. He was pacing. Thinking. Listening. Every noise outside his door made him pause. Every footstep in the hallway put him on edge. He had the unsettling feeling that he was not alone. It was late when he called his mother. His voice was low, urgent. He whispered through the phone, careful with his words. "I need to get out of here," he told her. And then, something stranger. He said he was being watched. But by who? He moved through the lobby, his posture tense, his head turning constantly. The security cameras caught everything, every nervous glance, every hesitation. He checked his phone, then stuffed it back into his pocket. He lingered near the front desk, as if debating whether to ask for help. Then he stepped away, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room. Searching. To anyone watching, he might have seemed restless. Anxious, perhaps. But to Lars, the threat was real. Someone was following him. He was sure of it. But why? And more importantly, who? The next morning, he would head to the airport. He would book a flight. He would try to leave. But Lars Mittank would never make it home. Lars Mittank arrives at Varna Airport early that morning, just like thousands of others. To anyone watching, he looks like another traveler, another face in the crowd. But the cameras see something else. His movements are sharp, erratic. He walks quickly, then slows. He glances behind him, scanning the terminal as if expecting to see someone familiar. Or someone unwelcome. He makes it to the check-in area. Stands still for a moment. Then something happens. Without warning, he turns. His body stiffens. His expression changes. And then, he bolts. The footage captures it all. 1 second, he is standing at the counter. Next, he is running. Faster than anyone else in the frame. Past the other passengers. Past security. He doesn't slow down. Doesn't stop to explain. He doesn't even look back. No luggage. No phone in his hand. Just Lars, sprinting through the terminal as if something, or someone, is right behind him. He bursts through the automatic doors, out into the open air. The parking lot stretches ahead, but he doesn't stop. He pushes forward, weaving between cars, his breath coming fast. Then, without hesitation, he reaches the airport perimeter. A high fence stands between him and the forest beyond. But he doesn't hesitate. He climbs. He lands hard on the other side, stumbles, then vanishes into the trees. And just like that, he is gone. What was he running from? Inside the airport, security reacts. They review the footage, send out search teams. Helicopters comb the area. Dogs are brought in to track his scent. They follow his trail deep into the forest, but it doesn't last long. The footprints stop. The path disappears. And Lars Mittank is nowhere to be found. No body. No sign of struggle. No explanation. One moment, a man stood in an airport, waiting to go home. The next, he ran, without his bags, without his passport, without any known reason. And from that moment on, Lars Mittank ceased to exist in the world as we know it. What makes a man run like that? What makes him abandon everything, his phone, his passport, his bags, and flee as if his life depends on it? Was he running towards something? Or away from something the cameras couldn't see? One theory stands out: Lars was losing touch with reality. His mother recalls their last phone call. The fear in his voice. The paranoia. "They are following me," he whispered. "I need to get out of here." He was convinced someone was after him. But no one else reported seeing anything unusual. No one approached him in the airport. No one chased him. No one tried to stop him. So, was the danger real? Or was it only in his mind? A psychotic episode could explain his behavior. His erratic movements, his overwhelming fear, the way he sprinted into the unknown with no logical cause. Some speculate his head injury, a ruptured eardrum from the fight days earlier, could have triggered something deeper. A reaction to antibiotics. A mental break waiting to happen. If true, then Lars ran not from an external threat, but from something within himself. But others aren't convinced. They believe his fear was justified. That something, or someone, was after him. And that Lars knew it. What if he wasn't hallucinating? What if he had reason to be afraid? Some reports claim that during his stay at a cheap hotel near the airport, Lars was seen acting strangely. Pacing. Watching the windows. Refusing to sleep. He told his mother the place made him uneasy. That something wasn't right. Could he have overheard something? Witnessed something? Could he have become the target of a threat he couldn't escape? Some suggest organized crime. Bulgaria has long been linked to underground operations, human trafficking, drug smuggling, organ trade. A lone traveler, vulnerable, visibly paranoid, he could have been marked. Lured into something he never intended to be part of. And when he realized it, it was already too late. But there's another possibility. One that no one wants to consider. What if Lars never made it out of the forest? The search teams found nothing. No clothes. No remains. No sign of struggle. But forests don't simply erase people. Something happened after he disappeared into those trees. Something that left no trace. Did he succumb to the elements? Did he encounter someone, or something, that ensured he would never be found? Or is he still out there, somewhere, hidden away from a world that has never stopped searching for him? A man runs into the woods. And the world never sees him again. It's been years. The footage remains. The theories continue. But the only person who knows the truth is still missing. Story 3. A warm breeze drifts through Praia da Luz, a quiet seaside resort in Portugal. Families gather in restaurants, laughter carrying through the air. The ocean hums in the distance, waves lapping against the shore. It is the kind of place where time slows down, where worries seem to disappear with the setting sun. But on the night of May 3, 2007, time didn't just slow, it stopped. And for one family, a nightmare began. In apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort, a little girl sleeps. Blonde hair. Bright eyes. 3 years old. Her name is Madeline McCann. Her parents, Jerry and Kate, tuck her in alongside her younger twin siblings. They are on vacation, a getaway meant for relaxation. Just outside, the night is alive with the sounds of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the hum of distant music. At 8:30 p.m., Jerry and Kate step out, leaving their children behind. Their destination? A tapas restaurant just a short walk away. They are not alone. Their friends, other parents, are dining with them. And like the McCanns, they, too, have left their children sleeping in nearby apartments. But there is a plan. Every half hour, one of the parents will check on the kids. A system designed for safety. A routine that should keep everything under control. For the first few hours, it works. The night continues as planned. The drinks are poured. The laughter flows. And in apartment 5A, Madeline sleeps, unaware that she is about to become the center of one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history. The night air is warm. The sound of waves drifts through the open windows of the Ocean Club Resort. Inside the tapas restaurant, conversation flows easily, glasses clink, and the gentle hum of vacationers enjoying their evening fills the space. It is 10 p.m., a routine check, just like the ones before. Kate McCann rises from her chair, steps away from the table, and makes her way back to apartment 5A. The short walk is quiet. Calm. There is no sense of urgency, no feeling that anything is wrong. But in just moments, everything will change. She steps inside. The apartment is silent. Too silent. The twins are still in their cribs, undisturbed, their steady breathing the only sound in the room. But then, Kate's eyes move to the bed where Madeline should be. It is empty. The blanket is pulled back, the small space where her daughter had been now eerily vacant. Panic sets in. She scans the room, the hallway, the bathroom. Maybe Madeline wandered off, half asleep, confused. But the doors are shut. The only thing out of place is the window. It is open. A rush of cold air seeps in from outside. The curtains flutter. Kate rushes to the window, looks down. Darkness. A quiet street. No movement. No footsteps. No sign of her daughter. Madeline is gone. Her breath catches. The stillness of the room is suffocating. A moment ago, everything was fine. Now, nothing makes sense. She stumbles back toward the door, her heart hammering. And then, the scream cuts through the night, raw, desperate, echoing through the resort. The dinner, the drinks, the laughter, forgotten in an instant. Guests and staff turn toward the sound. Chairs scrape against the floor as people rush to see what's happening. But inside apartment 5A, Kate McCann already knows. Something is terribly, irreversibly wrong. A child is missing. In the first frantic hours, the world is silent. The streets of Praia da Luz remain unchanged. The waves still roll onto the shore, the stars still hang over the quiet resort town. But inside apartment 5A, nothing will ever be the same again. A desperate search begins. Holidaymakers, staff, locals, dozens of people comb the resort, calling Madeline's name. Flashlights sweep the dark streets, the shoreline, the alleys. But she is nowhere. No footprints in the sand, no discarded belongings, no cries for help in the distance. The minutes turn to hours, and then, the word spreads. A missing child. A mother's piercing scream. A father pacing in disbelief. A family whose vacation has turned into a nightmare. By morning, reporters have arrived. Camera crews set up outside the Ocean Club, journalists whisper into microphones, the first headlines begin to appear. The photograph, Madeline's face, wide-eyed and smiling, flashes across TV screens. Her name is spoken in languages across the world. And with it, the speculation begins. At first, it seems simple, a kidnapping. A stranger slipping into the room, carrying her away as her siblings slept just inches away. But then, details emerge. The window wasn't forced open, it was lifted from the inside. The apartment showed no clear signs of a struggle. Suspicious figures had been seen lurking near the resort in the days before, yet no one knows who they were. And then, an unsettling question takes hold, could the answer lie closer to home? Theories flood in. Some say it was a burglary gone wrong, that an intruder took Madeline in a panic. Others insist she woke up, wandered outside, and was taken by someone watching from the shadows. But a darker rumor spreads, that her parents know more than they are saying. That their story has gaps. That something isn't adding up. The media storm intensifies. Journalists camp outside the resort. Experts analyze Kate McCann's demeanor, Jerry McCann's interviews, the way they grieve. The world watches. Theories clash, accusations mount. But one truth remains, Madeline is gone. And no one can say where she is. A man walks through the dimly lit streets of Praia da Luz. In his arms, a child. Small. Barefoot. Wrapped in a blanket. Her head rests on his shoulder, her body limp as if asleep. He moves quickly, vanishing into the night. A witness sees him but does not stop him. Not then. Not until later, when the news breaks. A little girl is missing. And suddenly, that fleeting moment, that shadowy figure carrying a child, takes on an entirely new weight. Who was he? Where was he going? And more importantly, was the child in his arms Madeline McCann? Theories multiply. Some believe the abduction was planned, carefully executed by someone who had been watching the McCanns, waiting for the right moment. Others argue it was a crime of opportunity, an intruder expecting an empty apartment and taking the child instead. But there are those who reject both ideas entirely. They insist Madeline never left that room alive. Years pass, and the case grows only more tangled. Sightings are reported from every corner of the world. A girl with striking eyes spotted in Morocco. A child resembling Madeline seen in India. A teenager in a German supermarket. Each time, hope flares, and then fades. None of them are her. None of them ever lead to answers. Some believe she is still out there, living under a different name, raised by someone who knows the truth but will never speak it. Others fear she met a far darker fate, one the world will never uncover. And then, there are the questions no one wants to ask, the ones that linger in the spaces between statements, in the inconsistencies that have never been explained. To this day, Madeline McCann's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries of our time. No body. No definitive evidence. Just an open case file and a photograph that refuses to fade from memory. The world has not forgotten. But the truth remains just out of reach. Story 4. A quiet neighborhood. A home filled with the echoes of an ordinary life. A mother, Joan Risch, spends the morning tending to her routine, checking out library books, feeding her child, making calls. It is October 24, 1961, an unremarkable day by all accounts. But before it ends, something will happen within the walls of her home, something that will defy explanation for decades to come. At 2:15 p.m., a neighbor sees Joan in her driveway, walking toward her house. A simple moment. A glimpse of normalcy. It is the last confirmed sighting of her. Hours later, her husband arrives home to find the house eerily still. Their 2-year-old daughter is inside, unharmed. But Joan is nowhere to be found. And in the kitchen, there is something no one can explain. Blood. Streaked across the walls, pooling on the floor, leading in smears toward the back door. The telephone cord is ripped from the wall. A roll of paper towels sits on the counter, partially unspooled, as if someone had started to clean, and then stopped. The front door is locked. The back door stands open. There is no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away, no witnesses who saw anyone enter or leave. A search begins, but Joan is simply gone, vanished into the afternoon air, leaving behind only questions and a house frozen in time. A child sits alone in a house that no longer feels like home. She doesn't cry, perhaps she's too young to understand what's wrong, or perhaps she's been waiting so long that the fear has settled into something quieter. Outside, the world moves on as if nothing has changed. Cars pass by. Neighbors tend to their evening routines. But inside, in the dim glow of the afternoon light, a terrible absence lingers. The air is thick with the scent of something metallic. The kitchen, once an ordinary space of morning coffee and home-cooked meals, is in disarray. Blood smears the walls in uneven streaks, leading toward the back door in a trail that stops abruptly. A handprint, half-wiped, lingers like a ghostly echo of movement. The floor is stained, as though someone stood there for a moment too long before disappearing altogether. When authorities arrive, they expect to find signs of a struggle. A broken window. A forced lock. Some clue that tells them what happened here. But the doors were locked. No furniture is overturned. There's no sign of a break-in, no shattered glass, no hurried footprints in the yard. It's as if Joan Risch, a housewife and mother living an ordinary life, simply stepped out of existence, leaving behind nothing but confusion and a scene that raises far more questions than answers. In the trash, officers find an empty liquor bottle. A strange detail, but not one that should mean much, except that Joan wasn't known to drink. And yet, there it is. No fingerprints. No clear explanation. Just another piece of a puzzle that refuses to fit together. The phone sits uselessly on the counter, its cord torn from the wall. On the kitchen table, a roll of paper towels, partially unraveled, as if someone, Joan, perhaps, had started to clean up the blood before stopping abruptly. Was she interrupted? Did she try to erase the evidence of something terrible? Or was she in distress, reaching for anything that could steady her trembling hands? Outside, the sky darkens. The neighbors saw nothing. Heard nothing. The child, too young to explain, can only wait in the silence. The night creeps in, the wind rattling the trees, the air thick with unanswered questions. Somewhere beyond the reach of the porch light, beyond the quiet hum of a town settling in for the evening, Joan Risch is gone. And no one knows why. A woman walks along the edge of a highway, her clothes disheveled, her movements unsteady. She is alone, heading toward nowhere in particular, the road stretching endlessly ahead of her. The sky is beginning to darken, the last light of the day fading behind distant hills. A few passing cars take notice, some drivers glance at her in their mirrors, but no one stops. There's something about the way she moves, the way she doesn't acknowledge the world around her, that makes her seem just out of reach, like a figure slipping through the seams of reality itself. Later, one of those drivers would remember the sight of her and mention it to the police. A woman matching Joan Risch's description, walking near Route 128, looking lost, maybe dazed. But no one approached her. No one knows where she was heading. And just like that, she was gone again. Did Joan leave on her own accord? The idea lingers, unsettling in its implications. A woman, a mother, abandoning everything without a word. It seems impossible, until the details start to pile up. Books on disappearances, checked out in her name from the local library. Stories of women who faked their deaths, who vanished into new lives, their pasts left behind like old photographs tucked away in forgotten drawers. Had she been planning something? Was this her escape? And if so, what was she running from? But there's another possibility. One that doesn't end with Joan choosing to walk away but being forced to. The blood in the kitchen, was it hers? The telephone cord, yanked from the wall, was she trying to call for help? If someone had taken her, there were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, only the eerie, unsettling mess of a scene that looked neither staged nor entirely accidental. Was she led away? Coerced? Dragged into a car that blended into the ordinary rhythm of a quiet neighborhood, never to be seen again? No trace of Joan was ever found. No body. No final clue to explain what happened on that October afternoon. Just theories, glimpses, a single sighting on a lonely stretch of road, and then, nothing. The town moved on. The case went cold. And yet, decades later, the questions remain, unanswered, haunting, forever suspended in the space between logic and the unknown. A name etched into a missing persons file. A last known photograph, frozen in time. A question that lingers long after the world has moved on. These are the stories that refuse to fade, the cases that leave only echoes where answers should be. A man runs from an airport, vanishing into the wilderness, never to be seen again. A mother disappears from her home, leaving behind only blood and mystery. A child is taken in the dead of night, and the world is left to wonder where she is. Each of these lives, Lars Mittank, Joan Risch, Madeleine McCann, bound together by the unknown. Their names have become more than just names. They are questions, whispered in the quiet corners of history, questions without endings, without closure. What happened in that forest where Lars was last seen? Did he fall victim to something beyond our understanding, or was he running from something no one else could see? What became of Joan after she was spotted on that highway? If she was escaping, why did she never resurface? And for Madeleine, where is she now? Is she out there, alive, unaware of the world that still searches for her? These cases remain open, not just in files and archives, but in the minds of those who refuse to let them go. Time moves forward, but the void left behind never truly closes. And perhaps that is what haunts us the most. Not just the absence of answers, but the silence where truth should be. Some mysteries are solved. Others endure. Which of these stories lingers in your mind the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you find yourself drawn to the unexplained, subscribe for more mysteries that defy resolution.